You think you know your own family. You watch them grow, you hear their laughter at the dinner table, you believe in the picture you've all painted together. I believed it. For 78 years, I believed I was the bedrock of the Sterling family, that my name, Daren Sterling, stood for legacy, for love. I was a fool, a trusting old fool. The cracks didn't start with a bang, they started with a whisper, a shift in the air the moment my doctor mentioned the word prognosis. That's when the portrait began to peel, and I saw the rot festering beneath the gilded frame. They thought I was just a tired old man, counting down the days until they could carve up my life's work. They had no idea I was counting down, too. But my countdown wasn't to an end. It was to a reckoning. And it all began the day a young man, a complete stranger, walked into my life and called me grandfather. I remember the silence that followed his word. It was a physical thing, thick and heavy, pressing down on the opulent furniture of my study. My son, Alistair, his face, usually a mask of polished corporate calm, was frozen in a rictus of pure, undiluted horror. My daughter, Eleanor, let out a sound, a sharp, choked gasp like a startled bird. "What did you just say?" Alistair finally managed, his voice low and dangerous, stepping between me and the young man. The boy, he couldn't have been more than 25, stood his ground. He had a quiet dignity about him, a steadiness in his eyes that I recognized, though I couldn't place it. "My name is Leo," he said, his voice clear, cutting through the tense air. "My mother was Clara Sterling." And that's when the room truly exploded. Clara, my wild, beautiful, heartbroken Clara, whom I had not seen nor heard from in over 30 years, since the terrible night the night she left. "This is absurd," Eleanor shrieked, her composure shattering. She rounded on me, her eyes wide with a performative mixture of concern and fury. "Father, you can't possibly be entertaining this charade. Clara is gone, and she certainly never had a child." "It's a transparent, grubby little scam," Alistair sneered, not even looking at Leo, his gaze locked on me, probing, testing. "Probably some con artist who found an old family photo. Look at him. He doesn't look anything like us." But that was a lie, and I think in their panic they knew it. He had Clara's eyes, the same fierce, intelligent, sea-gray eyes that had haunted my dreams for 3 decades. I felt a tremor in my hands, a familiar, aching sorrow for my lost daughter, but beneath it, a cold, sharp focus I hadn't felt in years. The first pawn had been placed on the board. "He has her eyes," I said, my voice softer than I intended, letting a quaver of age and emotion color it. I saw Alistair's jaw tighten. He hated any mention of Clara. She was the family's original sin, the disowned daughter, the ghost at every feast. "Father, be rational," Alistair said, his tone shifting to one of patronizing reason. "This is precisely the kind of situation that preys on men in your condition. Your emotional state is vulnerable. This person is clearly exploiting that." Leo remained silent, his gaze fixed on me. He had been instructed to do that, to look only at me, to ignore their venom. It was a small thing, but it was everything. "My condition?" I asked, feigning a touch of confusion. "I'm dying, Alistair, not senile. There's a difference." The word dying hung in the air, a prize they could all taste. Eleanor flinched, but it wasn't out of grief. It was the flinch of a gambler seeing the roulette wheel slow. "Don't say that, Dad," she whispered, her voice thick with false tears. "Why not? It's the truth," I said, my eyes still on Leo. "The boy says he's Clara's son. He says he's my blood. The least we can do is hear him out." "Hear him out?" Alistair laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "So he can spin some sob story about a hard life and a dying mother's wish. So he can weasel his way into your will. I won't allow it. I am the executor of your estate, Father. It is my legal and moral duty to protect you from exactly this sort of predatory nonsense." Ah, the will. There it was, the heart of the beast. The Sterling fortune, built from timber and steel and a fair share of cutthroat business, was the sun around which my children orbited. They weren't planets of love and loyalty. They were vultures, circling, waiting for the last breath to leave my body. Your duty, I repeated slowly, letting the word drip with a skepticism I had never before dared to show. I leaned back in my leather chair, the familiar creak a comfort. Very well, perform your duty. Investigate his claim. If he's a fraud, you'll prove it. You're so very good at proving things, Alistair. The challenge was laid. I saw a flicker of surprise in his eyes. This wasn't the reaction he'd expected. He'd expected a confused, grieving old man, easily manipulated, ready to shoo away a stranger. He hadn't expected resistance. Fine, Alistair spat, pulling out his phone, his thumbs flying across the screen. I'll call Hammond. We'll have our lawyers bury this so deep he'll need a mining permit to see daylight. He shot a look of pure venom at Leo. You have no idea what you've just walked into, son. Leo finally spoke, his voice still calm, but with an undercurrent of steel that made my chest swell with a strange, proud emotion. I think I do, sir. That was the first crack, the first real visible fissure in the perfect Sterling family facade. And as I sat there, surrounded by the trappings of my wealth, watching my children's naked greed contort their faces, I knew the demolition had begun. They were so busy looking at the threat standing in front of them, they never once thought to look at the architect sitting behind the desk. The game was afoot, and they had just made their first catastrophic mistake. They had underestimated the dying lion. The days that followed were a masterclass in quiet, familial warfare. My home, a sprawling old manor that had once echoed with genuine laughter, became a fortress of whispers and sidelong glances. Alistair was a whirlwind of controlled fury, his phone permanently glued to his ear, barking orders to his team of legal bloodhounds. I want everything on this Leo Matheson. His birth certificate, his school records, his bank statements, his parking tickets. I want to know what he had for breakfast on his 3rd birthday. There will be a discrepancy. There is always a discrepancy. Eleanor took a different tack. She became my shadow, a constant, cloying presence of fabricated concern. She'd bring me tea, fluff the pillows behind my back, her voice a syrupy whisper. You seem so tired, Dad. This stress is so unnecessary. That horrible boy, he's stirring up such painful memories. Of Clara. She'd say my daughter's name like a curse, her eyes searching mine for a flicker of pain to exploit. We are your family, Dad. The family who has always been here. Alistair and I, we just want to protect what you've built. What I'd built. They always talked about it like it was a monument, a tombstone waiting for my name to be chiseled upon it. They never understood it was just a business. The real thing I'd built, the family, had crumbled to dust long ago, the moment I let them convince me to turn my back on my own daughter. I played my part perfectly. I let my hand tremble when I took the teacup. I let my gaze grow distant when Clara's name was mentioned. I sighed with the profound weariness of a man besieged. He has her eyes, Ellie, I'd murmur, watching her flinch at the childhood nickname. He really does. It's a coincidence, Father, she'd say, her smile tight. Or contact lenses. These people are sophisticated. These people, the outsiders, the threats. The narrative was being woven, thread by poisonous thread. The first real revelation came a week later. Alistair stormed into the study, a triumphant gleam in his eyes. Eleanor was right behind him, a hawkish look on her face. Hammond, our family lawyer, a man whose suit was as expensive and soulless as he was, followed, holding a thin file. Well, I asked, setting down my book, have you uncovered the dastardly plot? Alistair ignored my sarcasm. His story is that Clara, Mom, died 2 years ago from cancer, that she only told him about his heritage on her deathbed, that she gave him a locket. My heart, my old, tired heart, gave a painful, genuine lurch. Clara, gone 2 years. The pain was a fresh, raw wound. I had known, of course. I'd known the moment she'd gotten sick. But hearing it stated so coldly, used as a weapon in this war, was a new kind of agony. I had to use that pain, let it show on my face, let them see the grieving father. A locket, I whispered. A cheap silver thing, Hammond said, his voice devoid of inflection. He claims it contains a picture of you and a young Clara. It proves nothing. It could have been obtained anywhere. But Alistair interjected, his voice dripping with theatrical gravity. That's not the interesting part. The interesting part is his financials. The boy is clean, suspiciously clean, no debt, no criminal record. He works as a freelance graphic designer. Modest apartment, modest life. Eleanor frowned. So, he's a careful grifter. No, Alistair said, a slow, ugly smile spreading across his face. It's what we didn't find that's the real story. We couldn't find a birth certificate listing Clara Sterling as the mother. Not anywhere in the country. The room went still. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. This was a deviation. This was not part of the plan we had so carefully constructed. Leo's background was supposed to be airtight, a labyrinth of half-truths and obscured trails that would lead Alistair on a long, expensive, and ultimately futile chase. A missing birth certificate was a gaping hole. You see, Eleanor pounced, her voice shrill with vindication. I knew it, it's a lie, all of it, he's not her son. Alistair was watching me, his eyes narrowed, looking for a reaction. I allowed the confusion to show, the doubt. I let my shoulders slump. No certificate, but then who is he? That's the question, isn't it? Alistair purred. But I think the more pertinent question is, who is he working for? The question hung in the air, more dangerous than any of us could have imagined. They thought it was a rival company, a business enemy. They never once looked at me. What do you mean? I asked, my voice frail. This is too sophisticated for a lone wolf, father, Alistair explained, packing like a prosecutor before a jury. The clean financials, the calm demeanor, the sheer audacity of the claim, this has backing. Someone is funding this. Someone wants to destabilize Sterling Holdings right before the transition of power. They're using this boy as a pawn to contest the will, to tie up the estate in probate for years, to weaken us. It was a brilliant, paranoid, and utterly wrong conclusion, and it was perfect. It was leading them down a path of their own design, a path that would blind them to the truth unfolding right under their noses. So what do we do? Eleanor asked, her voice tight with fear. Not fear for me, fear for her share. We do what we always do, Alistair said, his voice cold and final. We destroy him, publicly. We dig until we find the real dirt and we use it to bury him and whoever is behind this. Hammond, I want private investigators on him 24/7. I want his life turned inside out. I want leverage. Hammond nodded. It will be done, Alistair. As they left the room, brimming with self-righteous purpose, I was left alone with the echo of my own thumping heart. The plan was evolving, taking on a life of its own. Alistair wasn't just trying to discredit Leo. He was going to actively destroy him. He was going to dig and dig and dig. And I felt a cold dread seep into my bones because I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that in his frantic digging for dirt on a decoy, my son was going to unearth something else entirely. He was going to find a grave he himself had helped to fill, and the ghost inside was not going to stay buried for long. The siege intensified. The manor felt less like a home and more like a command center for a war I had secretly declared. Alistair's investigators were like rats in the walls, invisible but constantly gnawing. I'd see them sometimes, nondescript men in sedans parked at the end of the long driveway, watching Leo, who had taken a small rental in the city, living his life with an infuriating, placid normality. He'd visit me once a week under the scornful gaze of my children, and we would talk. Superficially, we discussed his mother, Clara. We shared stories I had locked away in my heart for decades. The pain was real, a bittersweet agony, but it served a purpose. It sold the lie. But during those visits, when we were sure we weren't being recorded, Alistair was not above bugging his own father's house. We talked about the real war. Alistair's people are getting more aggressive, Leo told me one afternoon, his voice low. We were in the garden, the one place Clara had loved most. They've approached my landlord, my few friends. They're offering money for any kind of dirt. Let them, I said, my voice grim. They'll find nothing because there is nothing to find. You've been meticulously prepared for this, Leo. You are a rock. They will exhaust themselves trying to find a crack." He looked at me, those gray eyes so much like his mother's. No, not his mother, the woman he was pretending was his mother, filled with a concern that was, to my surprise, entirely genuine. "And what happens when they don't find a crack in me, Mr. Sterling? What happens when they start looking for the cracks elsewhere?" He was a smart boy. Smarter than I had given him credit for when I'd first proposed this insane, desperate plan. He understood the monster we were poking. "They already are," I confessed, the weight of it heavy on my soul. "Alistair is convinced you're a corporate pawn. He's looking for a puppeteer. But his search, it's casting a wide net. He's pulling on threads he doesn't even know are connected to his own crimes." The first of those threads snapped a few days later. It was Eleanor who brought the news, her face pale, her hands shaking. She found me in the study, and for the first time her fear wasn't for her inheritance. It was for herself. "Father," she whispered, closing the door behind her. "Alistair, he's gone too far." I looked up from the ledger I was pretending to read. "Oh, what has he done now?" "It's about the incident with the charity funds." She couldn't meet my eyes. "The Children's Hope Alliance." A cold stone settled in my gut. The Children's Hope Alliance. A charity I had founded in Clara's name after she left. A penance I could never fully pay. Eleanor had been its treasurer for the last 10 years. I had begun to suspect over the last year that the books were being creatively managed. It was one of the many reasons I had set my own plan in motion. "What about it?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "His investigators, they've been looking into Leo's financial backing. They started tracing shell companies, looking for the source of his supposed funding. They stumbled across some of the transfers I made, the ones I reallocated." Reallocated. Such a clean corporate word for theft, for stealing from a charity for sick children to fund her extravagant, secretive lifestyle. The vacations, the plastic surgery, the gambling debts she thought no one knew about. "I see," I said, letting the silence stretch, watching her squirm. "And does Alistair know it was you?" She burst into tears, real ones this time, born of sheer animal panic. "Not yet, but his man Hammond, he has the records. He's following the trail, he thinks it's connected to Leo, that this is the funding. But when he realizes it's just me being stupid," she collapsed into a chair. "Alistair will be furious. He'll throw me to the wolves to protect the family name. You have to stop him, Dad, please. You have to talk to him." There it was, the first domino, teetering. My own daughter, a thief, exposed not by a grand moral awakening, but by her brother's frantic, greedy attempt to discredit a phantom threat. The irony was so thick I could taste it, metallic and bitter on my tongue. I looked at her, this woman I had raised, this stranger consumed by avarice. I felt a profound, soul-crushing sadness, but I also felt the cold, hard satisfaction of a trap beginning to close. "I'll talk to him, Eleanor," I said softly. It wasn't a lie. I would talk to him, but not to stop him, to guide him, to make sure he followed the trail of breadcrumbs all the way to its inevitable, devastating conclusion. She looked up at me, her mascara running in black trails down her cheeks, a pathetic picture of remorse. "Thank you, Daddy, thank you." I just nodded, my heart a block of ice in my chest. She had no idea that her plea for salvation was just another log on the pyre I was building for them all. She had run to the firefighter, not realizing I was the one who had set the blaze. And as she left the room, sniffling, already planning how to spin her theft as a momentary lapse in judgment, I knew the real battle was about to begin. The battle between brother and sister, greed against greed. And I was the silent general, moving my pieces in the shadows. The phantom grandchild had done his job. He had turned them against each other, and the true cost of their betrayal was only just beginning to come due. The confrontation between Alistair and Eleanor was a thing of brutal corporate efficiency. There were no raised voices, not in this house, not where the staff might hear. It happened behind the closed doors of the library, but I heard every word through the heating vent in the room above. A childhood trick Clara and I had used to eavesdrop on boring adult parties. "You stupid, greedy woman," Alistair's voice was a whip-crack of contempt. $500,000, Eleanor, from a charity. Were you trying to get us all indicted?" "It was a loan," Eleanor cried, her voice trembling. "I was going to pay it back. You know how things have been with Charles and the divorce." "I don't care if you were funding a spaceship to Mars," Alistair shot back. "You don't steal from a foundation with the Sterling name on it. You've given Hammond and God knows who else a direct line to our private affairs. Do you have any idea the damage you've caused?" "The damage I've caused? You're the one who unleashed these bloodhounds. You're so obsessed with that fake grandson you're tearing the whole family apart." "He is not the one who is tearing us apart," Alistair roared, his composure finally breaking. "He is the symptom. You are the disease, your incompetence, your avarice. You're a liability, Eleanor, and in business, liabilities are removed." The silence that followed was more terrifying than the shouting. I could picture the look on Eleanor's face, the dawning horror as she understood her brother's meaning. "What are you going to do?" she whispered. "You are going to sign over your voting shares in Sterling Holdings to me," Alistair said, his voice cold and flat. "Today. You will then issue a statement to the board, citing health reasons, and resign from all family trusts and charitable positions, effective immediately." You're cutting me out." Her voice was a disbelieving thread of sound. "I am containing the fallout," he corrected her. "If you do this quietly, I will use the company's resources to cover the shortfall. No one will ever know. You will receive a generous but fixed annual allowance. If you fight me on this, I will hand the evidence over to the authorities myself and let you rot in a cell. Your choice." It was no choice at all. It was an execution. He was seizing her power, her birthright, using her crime as the blade. I felt a shudder run through me. This was my son. This cold, calculating monster was the boy I had taught to ride a bicycle. The poison of the inheritance had done this. The waiting, the wanting, the sheer magnitude of the wealth had corrupted him from the inside out. Eleanor must have nodded or given some silent assent, because I heard the library door open and then slam shut with such force it rattled the pictures on my wall. I sat in the dim light of the upstairs room, my breath fogging in the cold air, and I felt a profound and utter loneliness. This was my doing. I had lit the fuse, but watching the explosion was far more horrifying than I had ever imagined. I didn't have long to dwell on it. The next twist came from an entirely unexpected direction. It was my grandson, Kyle, Eleanor's son, a boy of 20 who had always been more interested in his video games and sports cars than the family business. He found me in the garden that evening, his face pale, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Granddad," he said, his voice uncharacteristically small. "Kyle," I said, forcing a smile, "come sit, tell me about the new car." I always asked about the car, it was our routine. He didn't sit. He stood there, shifting his weight from foot to foot, a nervous boy in a man's body. "It's not about the car." He took a deep breath. "Mom's a mess. She says Uncle Alistair is forcing her out because of some money." I stayed silent, letting him talk. This was new. Kyle was never part of the calculus. "She says it's because of that guy, Leo. That Uncle Alistair is so paranoid about him that he found some old mistake Mom made and is using it to destroy her." He looked at me, his eyes pleading for an explanation, for an adult to make sense of the world. "Is that true, Granddad? Is this Leo guy really that dangerous?" I looked at my grandson, truly looked at him. He was spoiled, yes. Entitled, certainly. But he wasn't evil. He wasn't a predator like his uncle or a thief like his mother. He was just a product of his environment, a boy drowning in a sea of money he never had to earn. And in that moment I saw a flicker of something I hadn't seen in a long time, genuine, uncalculated concern for his mother. "The situation is complicated, Kyle," I said carefully. But it's not fair, he burst out, his voice cracking with emotion. Uncle Alistair can't just do that. It's her money too. It's my inheritance. And there it was, the core of it. Even his outrage was rooted in the same poisoned soil. But it was a purer form of greed, a defensive one. He saw an attack on his tribe. Kyle, I said, my voice gentle, there are things happening that you don't understand. Then make me understand, he pleaded. Who is this Leo? Why is he here? Mom says he's a liar, but I saw him last week when he visited. He didn't seem like a bad guy. He nodded at me. He seemed sad. The observation was so astute, so human, it caught me off guard. Kyle was seeing what the others, in their greed, were blind to. The world isn't divided into good guys and bad guys, Kyle, I said, a profound weariness seeping into my bones. Often, it's just a bunch of flawed people making terrible choices for what they think are good reasons. He stared at me, confused by the philosophy. So what do? We wait, I said, my voice barely a whisper. We see how the pieces fall. But Kyle wasn't satisfied with waiting. I could see the rebellion brewing in his eyes, the need to do something, to protect what he saw as his. And as he stormed off, a new, unpredictable variable had been introduced into my carefully laid plans. My grandson, armed with righteous anger and a profound misunderstanding of the battlefield, was now loose in the game. And I had a terrible, chilling premonition that his next move would be the one that shattered everything beyond my control. He was going to confront Leo, and when he did, he was going to light a fire that not even I could put out. You ever see a storm brewing on the horizon? The sky turns that sickly green, the air gets so still you can hear your own heartbeat. That's what my house felt like after Kyle stormed out of the garden. A terrible, pregnant silence. I knew what was coming. I'd set the wheels in motion, but now one of the wheels, my own grandson, had broken off and was careening down the hill on its own. I felt a cold dread, a father's and grandfather's dread, knowing that the people I wanted to punish were also the people I, in some twisted, broken way, still loved. The collateral damage was becoming all too real. I was in the eye of the hurricane, and the other side of the storm was about to hit with a fury I could never have imagined. And it all started with a phone call in the dead of night. The phone rang at 2:17 a.m., a shrill, invasive sound in the sleeping manner. I was awake, of course. Sleep had become a foreign country to me. I let it ring 3 times, each ring a hammer blow in the silence before I picked up the receiver in my study. I knew who it was. He's here. It was Leo's voice, tight, controlled, but with an undercurrent of genuine alarm. Kyle, I asked, my heart sinking. He's drunk or high on something. He's pounding on my door, screaming my name, telling me to come out and face him like a man. I could hear the distant, muffled shouts in the background. He has a baseball bat, Mr. Sterling. A cold fist clenched around my heart. This was the unpredictable variable. This was the human emotion I hadn't fully accounted for. Don't open the door, Leo. Do not engage. Call the police. And have your grandson arrested. Leo's voice was sharp. That wasn't part of the plan. That's a line I won't cross. He was a good kid, a better man than any of my blood relatives. In that moment, I felt a surge of shame that I had dragged him into this sewer. Then get out of there, I urged. The back fire escape. Go to the safe house, now. I'm gone, he said, and the line went dead. I sat there in the dark, the dial tone buzzing in my ear like an angry insect. My hands were shaking, not from fear for myself, but from the sheer, terrifying speed of the collapse. I had wanted to expose their greed, their corruption, to have it unravel in a court of law, in a controlled demolition. I hadn't wanted a drunken, bat-wielding boy to be the wrecking ball. This was too messy, too dangerous, too real. I heard a commotion downstairs. Alistair's voice barking, Eleanor's hysterical sobs. They'd been woken by the phone, or perhaps by Kyle's departure. I slowly made my way downstairs, leaning heavily on my cane, playing the part of the woken, bewildered old man. The scene in the grand foyer was one of pure chaos. Eleanor was clutching her robe around her, her face a mask of tear-streaked panic. "He's gone to confront him. I know it. My boy, my Kyle. He's going to get himself hurt." Alistair was on his phone, his face a thundercloud. "I don't care if he's your best man, get over to that address now. My nephew is there and there's going to be trouble." He saw me and his eyes narrowed. "This is your fault, father. Your indecision, your sentimentality over this phantom. You've let a cancer grow in this family and now it's threatening to kill us." The hypocrisy was so vast it stole my breath. "My fault," I whispered, letting my voice tremble. "I am not the one who blackmailed his own sister. I am not the one who sent investigators to dig up dirt that ended up exposing her crimes. You lit this fuse, Alistair. You were so busy playing the titan of industry that you forgot you were supposed to be a brother, an uncle." He took a step toward me, and for a terrifying second I thought he might strike me. The veneer was gone, completely stripped away, revealing the raw, furious ambition beneath. "I am saving this family from itself, from her greed and from your weakness. I am the only one who sees the world for what it is, a battlefield, and you either win or you get trampled into the mud." Just then his phone buzzed. He looked down at it and the color drained from his face. He listened for a moment, then said, "Keep him there. Do not let him leave. I'm on my way." He ended the call and looked from Eleanor to me, his expression unreadable. "Your son," he spat at Eleanor, "didn't find Leo. He passed out in the hallway of the apartment building. My security team has him. He's safe." Eleanor crumpled in relief, sobbing on the marble floor. But Alistair wasn't finished. His gaze was locked on me, cold and calculating. "But Leo wasn't home. My men saw him fleeing down the fire escape. He was running." "Why would he run, father? A guilty man runs. An innocent man calls the police." It was a logic trap, one I had walked right into by telling Leo to flee. "Perhaps he was frightened," I offered weakly. "Perhaps," Alistair said, a slow, ugly smile spreading across his face. "Or perhaps he's not as clean as we thought. Perhaps my investigators finally found something that scared him enough to run. This isn't over. This is just the beginning." He turned and strode out of the house, leaving me standing there with his weeping sister. I felt a cold certainty that he was right. This was far from over. Kyle's reckless act had shifted the battlefield. It had made Leo look guilty. It had given Alistair a new scent. And I was deathly afraid of what he would find when he started digging in the wrong direction with renewed vigor. The decoy was now the prime suspect, and that meant every layer of his fabricated past was about to be put under a microscope. A microscope that could, if pointed just a few degrees to the left, reveal the architect of the entire scheme. Me. The next 48 hours were a tense, silent stalemate. Kyle was back, sullen and hungover, locked in his room. Eleanor floated through the house like a ghost, jumping at every sound, terrified of both her son's recklessness and her brother's retribution. Alistair was a ghost himself, absent from the house, undoubtedly holed up with Hammond and his team, dissecting Leo's flight. I felt the walls closing in. My carefully constructed play was threatening to become a tragedy. I had to reassert control. I had to remind them why this had all started. I summoned them to the study, all of them. Alistair, Eleanor, and a reluctant Kyle. The air was thick with unspoken accusations and fear. I sat behind my desk, the dying patriarch, and I began to speak, my voice soft but clear. "I have been doing a lot of thinking," I began. "About family, about legacy, about Clara." I saw Alistair's jaw tighten, but he remained silent. "When Clara left, when I let you all convince me that her choices were a stain on the Sterling name, I believed I was protecting this family. I let the pain show in my eyes, let my voice crack with genuine emotion. I was wrong. I was so terribly wrong. I sacrificed my daughter on the altar of our reputation, and I have lived with that regret every single day for 30 years. Eleanor was staring at me, her eyes wide. This wasn't the script. We weren't supposed to talk about real feelings. We were supposed to talk about money. This boy, Leo, he may be a fraud, he probably is. I looked directly at Alistair as I said this, feeding his narrative. But his appearance, the mere possibility that a piece of Clara might still be out there, it has forced me to see the truth about what this family has become. I let my gaze sweep over them, my children, my grandson. We are a rotten tree. The fruit looks good on the outside, but it's worm-eaten and bitter inside. Alistair, your ambition has consumed your humanity. Eleanor, your greed has overridden your conscience. And Kyle, your anger is misdirected. You're fighting for a kingdom that's already fallen. This is maudlin nonsense, Father, Alistair cut in, his voice cold. We are what you made us. You built this empire. You taught us that winning was everything. I taught you to win with honor, I thundered, slamming my hand on the desk, the sudden outburst shocking them all into silence. I taught you that a sterling's word was his bond, that family came before business. Look at you. You've inverted it all. You would sell your own souls for a percentage point. I took a ragged breath, the performance of a lifetime. That ends now. I have decided I am making a change to my will. The air in the room vanished. You could have heard a pin drop. This was it. The moment they had all been waiting for and dreading. Their eyes were locked on me, wide, hungry, terrified. Regardless of whether Leo's claim is proven or not, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, I am creating the Clara Sterling Legacy Trust. Half of my entire estate, half of everything will be placed in that trust. It will be used to fund the Children's Hope Alliance and to seek out and support young, disenfranchised artists, the kind of life Clara wanted to live. The reaction was instantaneous and volcanic. Half, Eleanor shrieked, leaping to her feet. You're giving half of our inheritance to a ghost, to a charity run by thieves. You were the thief, Eleanor, I shot back, my finger pointing at her. Or have you forgotten so quickly? She recoiled as if struck. But it was Alistair who was the most dangerous. He didn't shout. He didn't move. He just stared at me and his eyes were dead. Completely, utterly dead. You can't be serious, he said, his voice dangerously calm. I have never been more serious in my life, I replied, meeting his gaze. Then you have lost your mind, he stated, as if diagnosing a disease. You are cognitively impaired. You are being manipulated by a con artist and your own senile sentimentality. That document will never stand. I will have it contested and invalidated so fast it will make your head spin. Contest it then, I challenged him, my heart hammering against my ribs. Take your own father to court. Show the world what the Sterling family is really about. I dare you. It was the nuclear option. The one thing I knew he would never risk. The bad publicity, the scrutiny, it would be disastrous for business, or so I thought. Alistair smiled. It was the most terrifying thing I have ever seen. Oh, I will, Father, I will, but I won't be contesting the will. He leaned forward, his hands flat on my desk, invading my space. I'll be having you declared incompetent to have even written it. I have doctors, Father, specialists. I have footage of your confusion. I have statements from the staff about your erratic behavior. And now, I have your own words on this very day, confessing to profound, life-altering regrets and making fiscally irresponsible decisions based on the claims of a known fraudster. You've just given me everything I need to have you locked away in a comfortable home for the rest of your miserable, traitorous life. The room spun. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had anticipated greed. I had anticipated anger, but I had not anticipated this. This was a coup. My own son was not just going to steal my money. He was going to steal my freedom, my dignity, my very mind. He was going to erase me. I was outmaneuvered. I had played the weak old man too well, and he had used my performance as the very evidence to destroy me. The trap I had built for them had just snapped shut on my own neck. And as I looked into my son's victorious, dead eyes, I knew with a sickening certainty that I had just lost the war. You ever feel the ground disappear from under your feet? That's what it felt like when my son, my own flesh and blood, looked me in the eye and promised to bury me in a home, to steal my mind and my legacy in one clean, ruthless stroke. For a moment, just a moment, the world went gray. I saw the victory in Alistair's dead eyes. I saw the terrified comprehension in Eleanor's. I saw the confused horror in Kyle's. I had pushed them too far. I had backed the wolf into a corner, and now it was going to tear out my throat. The plan, my beautiful, intricate plan, lay in shambles at my feet. He was right. He had the resources, the doctors, the lack of morality to do it. He would have me declared incompetent, and everything I had built, everything I had wanted to set right would be his. But then I remembered something. A single, small, seemingly insignificant detail I had buried years ago, a detail so powerful it was my final, unplayable card. And I realized with a calm that washed over me like ice water that Alistair hadn't won. He had just committed his final and most catastrophic mistake. He had shown me his endgame, and now it was my turn to show him mine. The silence in the study after Alistair's declaration was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Eleanor was staring at her brother as if seeing him for the first time, the true monster she had helped create. Kyle looked like a boy who just found out the world was made of paper and was about to catch fire. Alistair stood there basking in his perceived victory. "Hammond is drawing up the papers as we speak," he said, his voice smooth and devoid of any human warmth. "The doctors will be here tomorrow morning for an assessment. It's for your own good, Father. You need rest. You need to be protected from yourself." I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I simply looked at him, and for the first time I let the mask fall completely. I let him see the man I used to be, the man who built an empire from nothing, the man who broke unions and outmaneuvered rivals and never, ever showed his hand until the last possible second. "You always were a brilliant strategist, Alistair," I said, my voice low and steady, no trace of a quaver, no hint of age. "You see 3 moves ahead, but you have one fatal flaw." He smirked, condescending. "And what's that, Father? Sentiment?" "No," I said, a slow, cold smile spreading across my own face. "Arrogance. You never once considered that the old lion might not be sleeping. You never considered that every piece you moved on my board." The smirk faltered just for a second. "What are you talking about?" "Leo," I said simply. A flicker of impatience. "The decoy, the pawn, what about him? He's finished. He ran. His credibility is shattered." "Is it?" I asked, leaning back in my chair, steepling my fingers. "Tell me, when your investigators were digging through his life, this suspiciously clean life, did they ever stop to wonder why it was so clean? Did they ever consider that perhaps it wasn't his natural state, but rather the result of a very thorough, very expensive scrubbing?" Alistair's eyes narrowed. I knew he had backing. "Oh, he had backing," I agreed. "He had the best. He had me." The words landed in the room like a grenade with the pin pulled. Eleanor gasped. Kyle's mouth fell open. Alistair just stared, his brain trying to process the impossible, to rewire his entire understanding of the last few months. "You," he whispered, the confidence bleeding from his face. "You hired him." "I didn't just hire him, Alistair. I created him," I said, my voice flat and hard. "Every document, every backstory, every clean financial record, I orchestrated it all. The missing birth certificate, a deliberate flaw. Too perfect a story would have made you suspicious. A single, frustrating loose end that made it real. It made you hunt harder. It made you dig in the exact places I wanted you to dig." I could see the pieces crashing together in his mind. The charity funds, Eleanor's theft. It hadn't been an unfortunate byproduct of his investigation. It had been the entire point. You set us up," Eleanor breathed, her face a mask of betrayed horror. "Your own children." "I gave you a chance," I roared, the sound echoing off the wood-paneled walls. "For years I watched you. I saw the greed festering. I saw you waiting for me to die. I created a test of your basic human decency. And you failed spectacularly. Alistair, you didn't just try to discredit him. You tried to destroy an innocent man. Eleanor, you were stealing from dying children. And when faced with the consequences, you turned on each other like rabid animals. You proved to me, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that you do not deserve a single cent of my legacy. Alistair was shaking his head, a desperate denial. It doesn't matter. None of this matters. You're still an old man and I still have the power. My doctors will be here tomorrow. Your little confession changes nothing. In fact, it proves my point. You concocted an elaborate scheme to defraud your own family. That's the definition of instability. Is it? I asked softly. Or is it the definition of justice? You see, you're right about one thing, the game is over, but you've misread who has the winning hand. I reached into the top drawer of my desk. I pulled out a small, old-fashioned digital voice recorder. I held it up for them all to see. Then I pressed play. I am having you declared incompetent. I have doctors. I have footage. You've just given me everything I need to have you locked away. Alistair's own voice, cold, calculating, and utterly damning, filled the room. His face went as white as chalk. You see, I explained, my voice conversational. While you were all so busy watching the decoy, you never thought to sweep your father's study for bugs. This room has heard every secret you've whispered for the last 6 months. Every plot, every scheme, every threat. This, I said, tapping the recorder, is just the latest, and it's not the only copy. Alistair took a stumbling step backward. The invincible titan was crumbling. You caw. I can and I will, I said. This, along with the evidence your own investigation uncovered about Eleanor's theft, and the testimony of one very relieved decoy, will be more than enough to not only void any petition for incompetence, but to have you removed as executor and investigated for conspiracy and attempted fraud. Your career, Alistair, is finished. It was over. I had won. The look of utter devastation on his face was a hollow victory, but a victory nonetheless. But the reckoning was not yet complete. It was Kyle who spoke next. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension like a knife. And me, Granddad, he asked. Where do I fit into all this? Was I just collateral damage? I looked at my grandson. The anger was gone from his eyes, replaced by a deep, profound hurt. He was the innocent bystander caught in the crossfire. No, Kyle, I said, my voice softening for the first time. You were the surprise, the variable I didn't plan for. When you went after Leo with that bat, you showed fire. A misplaced, reckless fire, but fire nonetheless. You were fighting for your mother. However flawed she is, you were loyal. That means something. I turned my gaze to Eleanor, who was weeping silently, utterly broken. Your mother will repay every penny she stole. She will work for the charity for the next 10 years without pay to do it. She will have her allowance, enough to live comfortably, but no more. She will learn the value of what she so carelessly took. Then I looked back at Alistair. You are disinherited. You will receive nothing. You will resign from Sterling Holdings immediately. If you fight me, I will release every recording, every piece of evidence to the press and the authorities. You will spend the rest of your life in court, if not in a cell. Your choice. The mighty Alistair Sterling deflated before my eyes. He was just a man, a defeated, broken man. Without a word, he turned and walked out of the study, out of the house, and out of my life. The room was quiet again, but the silence was different now. It was the silence after the storm. Epilogue. So that's my story. The story of how I brought down my own family to save what was left of its soul. Alistair resigned. He moved to another state, and I hear he's working as a mid-level consultant. The fall from grace was humbling. Eleanor is, true to her word, working at the Children's Hope Alliance. She's miserable, but she's there. And for the first time in her life, she's earning something, even if it's just redemption. Kyle surprised me. He came to me a week after the fallout. He said, Granddad, I don't want the money. I want to learn the business the right way from you. So he's my apprentice now. He's got a long way to go, but the desire is there. The want to build, not just to inherit. And Leo, I gave him a choice. $1 million tax-free to walk away and start a new life, no strings attached. He took it. But before he left, he shook my hand and said, "She would have been proud of you, sir, for finally fighting for her." He was talking about Clara, and for the first time since she left, I believed it might be true. The Clara Sterling Legacy Trust is now the majority shareholder of Sterling Holdings. The company is run by a board dedicated to ethical practice and massive charitable giving. The money will do what I always should have done with it: help people. They say you can't choose your family. Maybe that's true, but you can choose your legacy. I chose to burn the rotten tree to the ground, hoping one clean, strong shoot would grow from the ashes. I think it just might. I'm an old man. I'm tired. But for the first time in a very, very long time, I am at peace. The phantom grandchild was the key that unlocked the prison we had all built for ourselves, and in the end, we were all set free. Goodbye.